Welcome back, everyone, to our Believe It or Not chess series. And today is going to be quite hard to believe the chess we're going to see because, especially before computers came about, it's hard to imagine that anyone can calculate all the things that Garry Kasparov calculated in this game, all the variations he saw. It was so hard to imagine that the guy he's playing, who happens to be Grandmaster Anthony Miles from Britain, said that this guy must be like a monster with 28,000 eyes. And these eyes are always calculating, always looking for chess variations, always looking for tricks and traps. And this monster is almost impossible to defeat. So, what made this impression on Tony? Let's find out ourselves. Okay, we start off with a Queen's Gambit today. And Black decides to go for a Slav. Okay, with c6, he basically says, okay, let's take out my bishop later on if I get the chance. And the real Slav would happen after knight f3, pawn takes, a4, bishop f5. Now, that's not what Garry had in mind. You know, Garry was playing a match with Anthony Miles, and he really, really wanted to win, even with Black. And in order to get some fighting chess with Black, he decided to go for the Semislav Meran. So in the Semislav, you make this sort of pyramid. You put the pharaoh in the middle of the pyramid so he can see everything. And then you have something called the Meran variation. Okay, the Meran is based on this idea that we give up the center. We say, you want the two pawns, you can have the two pawns. But my pawns will come right at you with b5, c5, and strike at your center later. Okay, Anthony says, what's the big deal? I'll just go back, and we say, well, very soon the big deal is coming to hit your center. Okay, we can't play a5 right away. I wish we could. You know, in some variations you can, sometimes you can't, but here it's a little bit much. So first Garry says, how about I keep an eye on b5, and later c5 is coming to make my bishop proud. Okay, Tony decides to be very principled here in this game, and he says, I know I have to take the center. I know I have to hit your chimney before it's too late, before you strike down my center. Okay, and after c5, nowadays we look at moves like d5, and it's very complicated, but at that time, they were looking at e5. Okay, he strikes at the center right away, and all kinds of things are going on in the center. So if the knight goes away, white is very happy, right? Takes, takes, and white got everything he ever wanted. Even if you take, okay, I'll take back with my bishop, let's say, or even with my knight. So all of these positions are great for white. We can't afford to trade off the knights. So instead, he decides to take, okay? And here's where the craziness begins. Okay, why is this game so hard to believe? Because all kinds of things are hanging. There is a knight hanging on f6, but good players, they just calculate through everything. Even before computers came about and helped us in these positions, good players like grandmasters would calculate, I take you, you take me, and what's going on there? And they would calculate many, many moves ahead, like Garry did here. So they found out that if white just takes right away, nothing happens. I mean, this is nothing special, and black is fine after takes, takes, and if pawn takes, probably bishop takes, bishop blocks, bishop takes a1, queen takes, and maybe a rook g8 at the end. Okay, that looks fine for black. Okay, and now the next person playing white decided, what if we try knight takes b5? And that's what Anthony had in mind in this game. So he said, what if I just desperado my knight and then take up your horsey over here? How do you feel about that, Garry? And Garry said, not a problem. I'll just pick up your important pawn over there. Even if you take this guy, it's okay. I got the important pawn. And once the important pawn is gone, then we can also go for bishop checks. We can get our other bishop out, and yes, you can attack my king, but I don't think it's that scary. Material is even. If you count the pawns, it's actually the same. And my pieces are coming out to kick back your pieces, and I think queen takes d4 will make black very proud here. Okay, even if you don't allow this, even if you play the right moves, black is considered totally fine, which is why We have the even crazier move, Queen A4. He says, you want my pawn? It'll have to cost you something, maybe even your king. Okay, so now the variations get really complicated because there's a pin on the pawn, so it can't take the knight. Okay, and there is another pin potentially on the king. It looks like the knight couldn't go anywhere. Okay, 100 years ago, I don't think Steinitz would be brave enough ever to take this pawn. Okay. And then Gary said, you know what? I'm a monster with 28,000 eyes. So I'm just going to take it on because I see everything and I see that this queen does not scare me at all. This check, however double and however effective, does not scare me. Go for it. Okay. And he dares Tony to go for the check. Takes, and now we have a decision to make. Which check do you go for? We have a bunch of scary checks. But this monster came prepared because if you come after my rook, it turns out that your own king may get in more trouble because this knight is now on the rim. Our knight is coming back. Our bishop is coming here to trap your poor knight. Your king is not feeling great at all, whereas my king is actually totally fine. He will survive and live to tell the tale. Okay? So it's not so easy for white to play this either. Okay, you have a bunch of scary checks, and even though they're scary, what do they actually do? It's not clear. In the game, he went for this check, and we'll see what happened. But any check you do, like knight takes d4, not a problem. Okay, and so I should probably mention that even in those times, if Gary was playing this position, I'm sure he was sitting at home looking at all this, and the monster with 28,000 eyes is not just all seeing, he's all prepared. He prepared this position with a bunch of his friends. Okay, and even before computers came about, because this was still the year 1986, before computers got really, really strong, Gary and people like Gary were so well prepared that they knew exactly what was going to happen. And at least they had an idea of the complications arising from 96. Okay, so he said, you know what? If you give me a check, it's not the end of the world. You can even give me one more check. Okay, so the king starts running. We don't have a choice, right? It looks really scary for this king, but the knight is the only good piece white has. And the knight has to be traded off. Now, here's the critical point. What would you play if you were black? Would you take with the queen, with the rook, or something else? I'll give you 3 seconds to think about it. Which way should we take back? Three, two, one. And congratulations if you found the incredible, mind-blasting, mind-blowing King f6. It's not exactly the first move that comes to mind, is it? Most people would just say, oh, okay, you capture me, I capture you back. But here is the problem. If you capture back with the rook, it turns out they have bishop takes. And the bishop is saved, and they're going to get out of danger. They have the bishop pair. Why is there a king in the middle of nowhere? And this ain't so pretty. Queen b5 breaks the pin, and we don't really have much to show in this position. Okay, so then you could say, whoa, whoa, what about the queen takes? Queen takes knight, and everything's good, and the pawn's protected, but we have bishop e4, keeping the bishop pair, and when the rook goes away, then the queen comes and destroys everything. So this is also annoying for black. Okay, so Gary's team and friends looked at this at home and they discovered this move, which I'm sure Gary would not play just for fun. They discovered king of 6, which is ingenious. This is really human ingenuity right here. It's so, so creative. It may not be good, and nowadays, computers just laugh at it and say, what are you doing with your king? But the thought behind it is so clever. Because if you think about it, why are we leaving the knight here? The bishop is hanging. Two things are hanging in the air, so we don't even need the knight back. When your bishop moves, we'll see what we can do about that knight. Because if your bishop moves here, like in the game, then I can take here, and you don't have bishop takes anymore. Okay? If your bishop moves back, I think it's the same thing. Rook takes c8, and black is happy. Now, on the other hand, if you try something else, Yeah. Then we'll see about queen takes. Okay. If your knight goes away, I can even take here first and then take your knight. Okay. So he avoids all the problems of taking right away by playing king f6. Such a weird move. Just running the king in no man's land. Okay. And I'm sure Tony must have been confused. He's like, what is going on here? I don't understand. Can I just attack your rook and get out of danger? Garry says, sure, but I'll pick up your knight now. Now, I should probably tell you a secret. This whole idea, king of six, by computer standards, is not exactly right, and bishop takes a6 is good enough to ruin it, unfortunately. Otherwise, it will be just amazing. As it is, it's still very clever, but bishop takes a6 is a nice reputation. And of course, Gary's team must have seen this move and said, oh, okay, we take the knight, now your bishop is pinned, and we're gonna get your bishop, and everything's great. But they missed something, which computers show in 2 seconds. Even Garry saw this during the game and he was furious with himself. He said, how could I not see this? Now, thankfully, Tony believed him. Tony said, oh, okay, probably this is bad for some reason. Queen takes c8, so instead I'll go here. I should show you what happens if bishop takes. Queen takes, and queen takes d4. Whichever way you pick off the bishop, you get mated. Check, check, and mate. And that's how the game could have ended really easily. Okay. Luckily for Garry, who's still a monster, he got lucky with bishop e4. Okay. And after that, it was all downhill for white. Let's take a look. Rook takes back, and now the calculations begin. Okay. This is a scary move because he's just saying, I'm going to checkmate you. Okay. It's a useful move too because the rook can come out. It's a window in some cases. Bishop g5 is on the horizon, no matter what you do. But h6 stops it. So of course, Garry uses his thousands of eyes to say no to your check. And even if you go for this, his thousands of eyes and his calculation powers have seen that pawn takes, king takes, rook takes, and not bishop b4, which is actually unclear. Okay, bishop b4 looks clever because we win the rook, but then there is queen takes d4, I think, and f4, and it's not at all clear. This position is very complex. Okay, it's not clear who's better after queen takes d4 here. Okay, I would be horrified for the black king. Apparently, it's close to equal, but white is a little bit better. Okay. Now, that being said, even better is just rook c4. And this is what Garry had in mind. Garry said, even though my king's in the middle of no man's land, who's going to get him? You, no one. Okay. Queen runs away. Hello, white king. Hello, white bishop. Now we're in control. We're the captains now. Okay. And so in the game, Tony did not go for the check. Instead, he just castled. He got scared of all those eyes, of all that calculating, and he just said, let me play like a normal person and just take out some pieces already. And Garry said, sure, take out some pieces while I double attack you in all kinds of ways. Okay, queen has to run back, and hello to the pawn. The pawn is coming. The bishop is hanging. Okay. If the bishop goes back to a normal square for starters, I see a healthy pawn. Queen h2, or I say queen h2 on the horizon coming up. All right. But in the actual game, that's not what happened. Rook e1 is also a bad move. Okay. And now I'll give you a second to try and find a tactic. Black to play and win. We have great centralization. Even the king is centralized, right? But the pawn is doing a great job. And their pieces are clumsy. Whenever you see clumsy pieces, look for tactics. So I'll let you try to find it. Black to play and win material. 3, 2, 1. And the answer is rook takes. After we take on c1, no matter what they do, we get the material back with interest. Okay. For example, queen takes, we go for d2. Okay. Then we take our rook back, and we're just up a piece. In the game, he took with the rook, but that didn't help matters after d2 anyways. Okay, that's a forking distance, and even when one rook goes away, we don't even take the rook. We could try that, but there's a queen hanging. So that's what Tony probably saw. And he said, "What fork? I don't see any fork. I'm just pinning your queen." But the monster sees everything. And the monster says, "What if I attack your bishop and your rook?" Okay? I don't even need your rook yet. I'm just going to keep my monster pawn here. Okay? And as the monster pawn distracts your rook, I'll collect your bishop. You could say, what if the bishop goes away? And I think he would have something like this in mind. Bishop c5, bishop b4 are both very tempting, just keeping the pawn here. Because very soon, with the pawn here, we can go for queen h4 and knight g4. Okay, so that would be effective. Also, can we just take the rook? He takes back, and at least we get to keep our queen, right? So even something like queen c6 looks interesting with bishop c5 in mind. Even this move comes to mind right now. Now, okay, queen takes knight, king takes, rook takes, and we have an interesting endgame. But that's the least that black has here. Okay, so at the very least, he gets back his investment, what he put in to this tactic. Okay, now in the actual game, Tony just gave back the bishop. He said, "I'm confused. Just leave me alone with your monster pawns. I'll take back your monster pawns, and at least I'm centralized." But so is black. And white's pawns are hanging. Remember that strong move h4, which was helping earlier? It's not helping anymore. That's the long-term effect of pawn moves. They tend to be weak. Okay? And let's see how the game ended. After rook e1, we just gobble the pawn, say hello to f2, knight g4 on the horizon, and no matter how scary the rooks look, the black pieces look even scarier. The skewer says hi to d2 and e1. One of the rooks is falling. And you could say, whoa, did he just blunder that? Well, not really. I mean, whatever you do, something is falling here. Too many threats, right? Knight g4 is a threat. Knight d3 sometimes with the idea like queen takes f2 or bishop takes and bishop takes e1, right? So too many threats to stop. Maybe I can even hide my king first, get the knight to safety, hide the king, and just play up material, because if you count the points, we're up material. Okay, so for that reason, white said, okay, let's attack. And if you want my exchange, you can get the exchange back. Okay. He sacrifices and tries to go for the attack, brings out Garry's king, but Garry calculates everything. He wasn't scared of the king on f6. He's not going to be scared of the sacrifice either. Okay. After bishop takes, if you take, I'll take your rook. One queen is not enough to mate anyone. You're out of soldiers, my friend. Okay. And if you go for g3, which is what Tony did, trying to confuse matters, yeah, it's okay. We just protect everything. Say hello to this guy, say hello to everyone. Centralized queen keeps the king warm and safe. After rook e4, queen just runs away, and we have an extra piece for no reason. So Tony resigned. Okay. What made this game special was, first of all, the amount of calculation, right? This was not easy for either side. White has to calculate all these checks. Black has to calculate all these checks. What's going on after, bishop g5 sacrifices, h4, bishop g5 later on. What's going on after bishop takes a6? So this is very calculation heavy. This shows how much humans can calculate, even before computers came about. Okay? And it also shows that we're flawed. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Even Garry missed a very elementary mate in 3, in 4, after queen takes d4. Okay? In this line. So we're not perfect, but this was still quite something. And it's hard to believe that the king can run around and laugh at white. Okay? So hopefully you enjoyed the game, and looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.